Firstly, the Israeli Broadcasting Authority today said that the cabinet, the war cabinet, the genocide cabinet, they authorized an attack on Iran. And they're only waiting for Benjamin Netanyahu's approval. They're waiting for the political approval for this operation. Now, the thing that's holding them back, according to that report, based on the Israeli Broadcasting Authority, is the fact that Iran might attack immediately. Now, that's very likely. Firstly, we had multiple statements from Iran saying that they will retaliate against any Israeli aggression in Iran. And we also had statements that they will be responding immediately. Recently, the tone intensified. We will strike back multiple times harsher. We will destroy your infrastructure. But today, we have something different. Today, we have threats coming from Iran, in particular from the IRGC chief, who is the man in charge, really, and who takes the biggest role when it comes to the IRGC and its operations abroad. He made this statement here. IRGC chief moots ground offensive against Israel. Firstly, there were only talks about a potential attack, missiles, drones, something that we were used to, potentially collaboration with the other resistance fronts. But this is the first time that we're hearing about a potential ground invasion coming from Iran against Israel. So what did he say? The commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guards, Hossein Salami, ramped up his rhetoric against Israel on Thursday, hinting at the possibility of a ground invasion operation just as Israel appears poised to launch a strike on Iran. We gave the Zionist regime this message. Look at the operations of Fath al-Mubin and Bayt al-Muqaddas. See if it can stand against another Fath al-Mubin, Salami said, referencing grueling Iranian infantry campaigns from the nearly decade-long Iran-Iraq war, which ended in 1988. In particular, there were 3 campaigns at the time. One of them was called Fath al-Mubin, one of them was called Bayt al-Muqaddas, and one of them was called the Path to Quds or Jerusalem, if I'm not mistaken. And these campaigns were successful campaigns that Iran conducted against the invading Iraqi forces at the time, and they ended with Iranian success, and they gave the Iranian forces momentum. However, the reference to them when it comes to Israel is hinting at a potential ground invasion to Israel. Otherwise, why would you want to mention ground operations when it comes to Israel, referencing the Iranian-Iraqi war? If a ground operation begins, can it escape the scale of our Bayt al-Muqaddas operation in 1982? He added, and he's talking to Israel, he's approaching Israel. The offensives were critical in forcing Iraqi forces out of southern Iran. Iran launched 2 aerial bombardments against Israel this year, once in April and the next in October, in the first direct confrontation with its arch enemy, the Islamic Republic's near 50-year history. It has never fought Israel with ground troops, which is correct. Salami also dismissed the US-provided THAAD missile defense system, which has been deployed in Israel in anticipation of further escalation. Do not rely on the THAAD missiles. They are limited, and you are depending on limited power. The US deployed 100 troops to the region this month, with President Joe Biden reaffirming his commitment to supporting Israel. Israel, preparing for possible further conflict, has requested an additional THAAD system from the US. According to Israel's Channel 12, THAAD designed to work alongside the Patriot system, can intercept threats at ranges of 93 to 124 miles. Salami's remarks come as Israel prepares a retaliatory response to Iran's attack with 181 ballistic missiles earlier this month. Well, it's not really retaliatory because Israel started it. Israel's planning an aggression, like they committed aggressions previously. The October 1st barrage was retaliation for Iran's assassination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah in Beirut last month, and likely the killing in July of Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. Although most missiles were intercepted, again, that's not true. Most missiles landed in October. Some or few hit military and civilian targets. Again, most of them landed on the military targets. Now they're starting to causing minor damage again. We saw the destruction. Anyway, what we wanted to hear is the main thing here, apart from the other stuff. The threat of a ground invasion coming from Iran. Now, how likely is this to happen, and is there a potential need for it? Does Iran need to send troops, and if they would, through which front would they send them? Because we had talks in the beginning about, potential people going from Iraq and Yemen. We had reports that were in some points inaccurate about certain troops going from Yemen to Syria in preparation. We saw, indeed, senior figures from the Iraqi resistance in Lebanon as early as since the war began, really, after Hezbollah's participation, showing, of course, solidarity with Hezbollah and willingness to support them if necessary. Now, the facts on the ground show that Iran doesn't necessarily need to send forces to attack Israel, because if we want to talk about the Lebanese front, which is one of the fronts, at least, where we would likely to see a limited invasion or a large-scale invasion, of course, alongside Syria, again, unless the resistance front and Iran are planning any surprises. In the case of Lebanon, Hezbollah themselves, they don't need more people because they have people fighting in the south. So what would be the need for Iranian forces? Well, really and truly, there wouldn't be a need to conduct the day-to-day operations. However, if we want to talk about a large-scale operation going to inside the occupied territories, you might need more people. Why? Because you need people, both inside and outside, to make sure that everything is functioning properly. Now, when it comes to Hezbollah, of course, they can conduct their operations normally. But if you want to have a large attack on Israel, then you might need additional forces. That's where Iran could play a role. And not just Iran. We had statements coming from Yemen previously. Yemen, as a matter of fact, they conducted many military drills that resembled ground invasions in Israel against certain settlements, Israeli posts. And when it comes to the Iraqi resistance, only one movement from the Iraqi resistance said that we're willing to send 100,000 troops to Lebanon to fight with Hezbollah. But again, we're talking about a large-scale scenario. What's different this time is the fact that Iran, indirectly, but with a very large hint, really, is signaling that they can potentially send troops, most likely to Lebanon or Syria as well, to participate with Hezbollah when it comes to an invasion to the occupied territories. This is something very dangerous, and it's a new development. This hasn't been something that we were hearing before. We were hearing mostly about a potential retaliation from Iran when it comes to missiles, mostly missiles, because that's their strong point when it comes to Iran. Drones, maybe, UAVs, but a ground invasion, well, primarily due to the geographical differences and the distance between Iran and Israel, there was no genuine need for that. And if Iran would bring up the subject of a potential ground invasion, then you're no longer talking just about a retaliation from Iran. You're talking about action from Iran that goes beyond an act of retaliation. This is the important thing. Why are they saying that? They're saying that because they are feeling and they are realizing that the attack on them can happen at any given moment. Delirious, you ask him about the subject here. If Iran has a plan to invade Israel, would it not make sense to have already began on a path through Syria? And when Iran does choose to invade, would it make sense, the most sense, to move via Syria? Absolutely, that's definitely one of the routes. Firstly, they have been established in Syria for a very long time. Syria played a very big role in the establishment of and the strengthening of the resistance fronts in general. Iran has many bases that it fully controls in Syria. They can have as many men as they want inside of Syria. However, they can also do that in Lebanon as well. And when we talk about a potential invasion from Syria and from the occupied Golan Heights, well, that's just next to the Lebanese borders. So there will be somewhat of a combination between the two fronts. It would not make sense just to focus on one of them and then avoid the other. That is, unless they have a surprise for us and they would come from where Israel did not expect them to come. We're hearing reports coming from the United States and the fact that some people say that they're worried that Israel might be conducting an attack without 100% coordination with the US. And again, how reliable is that? Not really that reliable, because Israel, at the end of the day, all of the weapons that it's using and all of the arsenal is coming from the United States administration. And just the other day, they gave them over $5 billion in emergency aid to Israel. So Iran is feeling that the attack is imminent. Therefore, they need to level up their leverage and level of threats as well when it comes to Israel, to warn them that they might also be conducting certain things that Israel did not expect. That's also due to the fact that Israel told them previously, we might attack you, or we might conduct an attack, not directly to Iran, but in general, they said, that isn't really expected. Now, what's not really expected? When they previously said that we will be using weapons we haven't used before in Lebanon, we saw the massive pager attack, where they targeted thousands of both Hezbollah operatives and civilians in one of the biggest terror attacks in history, using mass consumer goods, technology that's used by the masses against people. Yet again, some people were like, oh yeah, look what Israel's done, right? So they might resort to something like that in Iran. However, the success of that is not really guaranteed, because many countries already took precautionary measures when it comes to any attacks that would involve like technology or attacking pagers and things like that, because even Venezuela took certain measures after the attacks happened in Lebanon. However, Iran is preparing. And another thing that we heard that could also hint to preparations coming from Iran, and the fact that they might expect an attack coming from Israel and the United States administration that they didn't necessarily see before, is the statement of the supreme leader of Iran, Sayyid Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who said that the enemies are using the war is getting complex, and the enemies are using complicated means to try and hurt Iran. So we've established by now that nothing is conventional. We're not talking about a conventional war. As a matter of fact, the majority of the wars or genocides that were conducted by Israel and by Western establishments and Western countries were mostly non-conventional. And we wouldn't be expecting anything different when it comes to Iran. The only difference is now there isn't an argument that was as strong as it was 10 or 20 years ago against Iran. The propaganda machine isn't working properly. Everyone is seeing what's happening, at least those who are concerned about the matter. They're realizing what's happening, and everyone's saying, well, Iran has a right to defend itself, right? Or why is Iran not doing even more than what they're already doing against this genocidal entity? That's why you don't have a very large coalition when it comes to Israel and the United States. Like, firstly, the United States, they haven't really confirmed that they will be participating in anything to attack Iran. That's number one. Number two, well, there is no coalition. What coalition? We're talking about some Western countries, many of them traditional Israeli allies, having embargoes on Israel now, banning weapons from Israel, preventing Israelis from attending expos in Western countries, and also calls to take people coming from Israel who might have a suspicion that they participated in acts of genocide, taking them to court. We had a request in Britain, and that was approximately 6 months ago when the genocide case started, saying if you're coming from Israel and you have been witnessing any acts of genocide, please report it to the authorities. Now, why is that? It's because they indeed are interested in taking potential actions, or at least recording people who have committed war crimes in Gaza, in the genocide in Gaza. And now we have more cases being taken to the ICJ against individuals who are suspected, because don't forget, many people are bragging from Israel. And we have tracking websites now, and people actually tracking them. There's genocide tracking, looking at who's committing what, and potentially taking them to court and adding their names. So, in short, and to wrap up, there are certain talks that are saying we might be seeing certain de-escalations in the coming days or weeks, both in Gaza and in Lebanon. In Lebanon, we're talking about something more permanent. In Gaza, we're talking about something short and temporary and split. Both of them do not provide us with any reason to be hopeful, and are not full of substance that we can say, oh, well, something might happen because the talks are genuine this time. Israel is taking certain measures and they're reducing their numbers of forces, or anything else. The only signals that we're seeing are the complete opposite: more aggression, more forces being deployed. Israel intensified its attacks in Lebanon, all across Lebanon. They've intensified their attacks on the southern suburb of Beirut. And now they're openly taking down buildings, civilian buildings, with the same US weapons that they were using against Gaza. So although there is some talk about a potential de-escalation, there is nothing on the ground to support it. The only thing on the ground, and from the things that we are seeing, is the fact that we are headed towards something much bigger than what we have seen so far.